It's my immense pleasure to welcome Jeff Immelt to the BSR conference this morning. Jeff's tenure as chairman and CEO started just 4 days before September 11th, 2001. In a commencement address the same year, as we truly began to really understand the ways that we're all interconnected in our globalized world, Jeff emphasized the importance of business opportunities in China and other emerging markets. Fast forward 6 years later, and in 2007, GE realized that they had more revenue overseas than from within the United States. We at BSR have had the pleasure of working with GE's citizenship team over the past 5 years. I remember starting a conversation with the team about how do we begin to encompass all of the integrity and values that they had held over a century into a short CSR report. Additionally, we wanted to cover all of the businesses: healthcare, NBC Universal, industrial, financial. Not a small task. But they did it, and they pulled it off. They used principles of materiality and their strong reliance on their culture of execution and leadership. And not to be outdone, they have continued to challenge themselves in subsequent years, tackling human rights policy implementation and what CSR means for a first mover with a large global brand in emerging markets. As Jeff has said, opportunities for growth bring real social responsibility challenges. As BSR has grown, we have been challenged by our work with GE in ways that have pushed us forward and helped us to articulate the strong impact that a serious commitment to citizenship can have on creating value for business. This year, Jeff was named one of Time Magazine's 100 most influential people in the world. And I hope you can appreciate that he asked no one else but Conan O'Brien to write the profile for that article. Normally known for his very sharp satirical wit, Conan could not help but wax poetic about his boss, noting that any attempt to humanize a $320 billion monolith like GE will probably be met with cynicism. And it's easy for a CEO to pay lip service to going green or corporate responsibility. But Jeff seems to genuinely care about finding the nexus between doing well and doing right. God knows it's a job I wouldn't want, but I'm certainly glad he has it. A self-proclaimed optimist by nature, Jeff has stewarded GE through tremendous change in an ever-changing globalized world. His emphasis on creating and sustaining culture of integrity and innovation has led to new technologies in clean energy, water treatment, and medical technology that will transform lives for decades to come. He is focused on continuing to build a company that is more global, more innovative, and more focused on the customer. He's also invested heavily in the next generation of leadership at GE. In this week of great change for our country, speaking about the marathon task of running GE, Jeff said, "It's the sustained ability to change that really counts." Please help me welcome an agent of change and innovation, Jeff Immelt.
Thank you. Well, thank you and good morning. It's great to be with you. It's an ugly day outside, and it matches people's moods, it seems. Right now, when I talk to some of our GE people, I say, hey, look, the bad news is we're living financial history in a negative sense. The good news is we own CNBC, so at least we make something off of it. Whether people watch CNBC ratings are extremely high. It's great to be here with you this morning. What I'll try to do in a very short period of time is to kind of share some of ideas we have at GE and that we continue to formulate around the subject of corporate social responsibility. Tell you kind of, it's always a work in process from a standpoint of what we do and what we're learning and where I still think we need to change. And then what I really find most enjoyable is to get your questions, hear what's on your mind, and let the conversation go wherever it should go. And like I said, I think we've worked with BSR for a long time as a company, and we've always learned from this group, and we really appreciate the association. So I would make 5 points this morning to maybe frame my discussion and give you some things to think about. The first one I think is that the economic crisis that we're going in right now doesn't represent a cycle, it represents a reset. And I think people that understand that will prosper in the future, and people that don't understand that will, I think, get left behind. It represents a reset in the following ways. I think specific industries will be restructured. Financial services industry will be restructured. the financial industry of 2 or 3 years from now won't look like the financial service industry of just 6 or 9 months ago. And the notion of country power, country wealth, aspects associated with these industry restructuring is going to evolve and change in a very important and powerful way over the next 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, year. The intersection of government with business will be changed maybe for a generation. You know, I joined GE in 1982. I would say from 1982 up till about 9/11, nobody in the corporate world ever thought government was important in the slightest, or that the strategic notion of our lives or what we did had any bearing, and trips there were viewed as a waste of time. Well, I'd say that's changing a little bit, right? 9 banks, you know, people say, hey, where's the next program? What's going on? So this intersection with government, not just in the US, I was in Europe last week, is a very powerful force, and I think will change as well. So industry's restructuring, the intersection of government and business, and I think the combination of those two things say that the era of transparency, accountability for corporations, responsibility is profoundly different today versus where it was even 6 months ago. So I think some of you are apprehensive when you came here today or came here this week saying, you know, in an economic downturn, is my function going to get cut because we can't, you know, ascribe what we do to bottom line necessarily? I think when we come out of this fog, you know, this notion that companies need to stand for something and need to be accountable for more than just the money that they earn is going to be profound. It's going to be expected. And the world of thought in that context will be reset, not just evolve. So point number one, you're always going to call this an economic cycle. Economists will call this an economic cycle. It is an economic cycle. It's a housing bubble burst. It's synthetic debt vehicles. I mean, I could spend a lot of time talking about it. I'm not sure you want me to do that this morning. It's a reset. It's an emotional, social, economic reset. Point number one. Point number two, people are afraid. People are afraid in Europe, they're afraid in Asia, they're afraid in the United States. People are fundamentally afraid because they don't think they can compete anymore. When you have an economic downturn, when people aren't sure about their economic future, when you go through time periods of political and social unrest, people are just afraid. Good people are afraid. And you know, they don't understand what's happened on Wall Street. They don't understand why they can't get financing to buy a car. They just don't understand. And in some ways, I think it needs to drive kind of a sense of what business is, you know, really responsible for in the first place. And that is to teach people how to compete. You know, in other words, the formulation of, you know, kind of the industrial age in the United States, or you know, what's happened in China over the last 20 years. You know, I stand here today confident because I've been taught how to be competitive. And my job with 320,000 people at GE is to make them get up every morning confident because they know how to compete. And so the burden now, I think, in this reset world, if you will, is back on business to turn this fear into confidence by really impacting the competitive structure of the economies that we deal in. And I've traveled the world. I've, in 26-year GE career, been in 100 countries and probably met, you know, by this point, ministers of health, ministers of finance in every country in the world. And I would say the pillars of competitiveness are energy, healthcare, education, and financial systems that promote innovation. And in some way, shape, or form, the intersection of competitiveness and confidence have to take place around those pillars that are so important in every country in the world. And businesses need to be about broadly speaking, problem solving to provide competitiveness, to make people self-confident so that they feel like they can win again.